The following story is a very personal one. I'm not going to say that I'm a good person. In fact, I deeply regret what I did. But as they say, everything you do comes back to you, especially when you hurt good people. Hello, Last Guest community. My name is Monica, and for a long time I lived off men's money. It wasn't something I learned overnight. From a young age, I realized that with a little affection and the approval they were looking for, I could convince them that I loved them. That's how I started taking money from them and accepting the gifts they offered me. It worked from the first try, and I didn't stop. It wasn't hard work, it was in my nature. Most of them were married men who were just looking to be with someone younger. That was always my justification. I didn't think I was hurting anyone. They bought me things I could never have had on my own. They took me on trips to different states in Mexico and gave me money without me asking for it with words. When I was a child, we always had needs, and now life felt easier. I liked living that way. The only thing that mattered to me was my appearance. I had to look good, that's all. Keeping some men interested was much easier than it seemed. At least with the ones who approached me. And if you're wondering how I met them, the answer is simple. I worked in a hotel bar, I worked the night shift, and sometimes men with money would come in, mostly businessmen or travelers who stayed for a couple of days. The atmosphere in the bar was always the same, dim lighting and soft music. I moved between the tables as if I were part of the place. They were the ones who approached me. I just smiled and listened. It didn't take me long to know who was willing to spend money. Some told me about their businesses, others about their problems at home, and a few barely spoke, but they made it clear what they wanted. At first, I thought it was luck, but over time I realized it was a matter of observation. All I had to do was notice who was looking at me more than usual, or who let their hand brush mine when I served them a drink. After that, everything happened quickly. They asked me out, to dinner, or even to travel. I accepted and let things flow. One took me to Monterey just because he said he wanted me to see his city. He took me to restaurants and shopping malls, and I didn't spend a single peso. For me, it was a fair exchange. They wanted company, and I knew how to provide it. I didn't think about their own or their children. It was a world that didn't touch me, and the more I got used to that lifestyle, the less I saw the possibility of living any other way. But I also knew it wasn't going to last forever. There were nights when I looked at my reflection in the bar and thought about how long I could keep going like this. At those moments, I remembered my childhood and told myself that I had already lived through the worst, that I deserved to enjoy myself while I could. The truth is that I never imagined that this way of life would lead me to discover something that would change everything. I'm not going to say I was a saint either. On several occasions, I did manipulate them in a certain way or pretended I didn't care if they left. It was a game I knew how to play. Soon enough, they came back on their own looking for my attention. All I had to do was tell them I could get another man whenever I wanted and that I wouldn't have a problem doing it. That made them try harder to take care of me and prove to me that they were better than anyone else. I was always the one who benefited. I knew how to keep them where I wanted them until Lisandro came along. He was different. He was kind and caring, and he made me feel loved and appreciated. I wanted to be with him, and I wanted him to be with me. I wanted him to be the one I spent the rest of my life with. That made them try harder to take care of me and prove to me that they were better than anyone else. I was always the one who came out on top. I knew how to keep them where I wanted them until Lisandro came along. Things changed when he came into my life. I met him at the bar one quiet night. The lights were low and there were few customers at the tables. He was sitting alone in a corner. I approached him because that's what I always did, but also because his presence caught my attention. He didn't seem nervous like the others, nor was he trying to get attention. He was a man of about 30, tall with a thick beard. When he smiled, his crow's feet showed, and although I find it hard to admit, he conveyed a sense of confidence. I don't know if it was the way he looked at me or the calm tone of his voice. He seemed like someone who was in no hurry at all. During our conversation, he told me he was divorced and had 2 children. He spoke about it without drama, as if he had already accepted it all. I followed my pattern, sat close, listened to him, and smiled at the right moments. That night, I stayed with him until the bar closed. We exchanged numbers, and the next day, he invited me to dinner at a nice restaurant. One of those places I hadn't been to many times, but that I knew how to take advantage of when someone else was paying. As usual, I acted calm, as if everything he said was no big deal. It was a strategy that worked for me because it made them want to show off to impress me. That night, I also ended up in his room. As always, I acted calm, as if everything he said was no big deal. It was a strategy that worked for me because it made them want to show me they could impress me. That night, I also ended up in his room. While he was asleep, I took some money from his wallet. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover some expenses. At dawn, I left quietly. I didn't feel bad. It was part of my routine, and he was just another client. But unlike the others, Lisandro kept writing to me. He sent me messages every day asking how I was or what I was doing. At first, I thought he was like the others, that he would soon get tired of me or that I would stop seeing him myself. But a month later, he surprised me with a different message. He told me he had moved to my city for work and wanted to see me. I thought it was strange. None of the men I had been with had ever gotten so close to me. They were always just people who were passing through, people I saw a couple of times and then disappeared. Not him. He was only a few minutes away from where I lived. That first month Lisandro was in town, he was very nice to me. He took me out to eat, gave me gifts, and treated me in a way I couldn't criticize. He didn't snub me, he didn't keep me waiting. And while he wasn't overly attentive, everything he did well. But there was something I didn't like. I felt that he was the one in control of our dates, not me. We saw each other when he wanted to and how he wanted to. He didn't let himself be manipulated like the others. He didn't fall for the same games that were so effective with me. At first, I tried not to give it any importance. I told myself that he was just another man and that sooner or later I would get tired of seeing him. So I kept dating other guys. I would meet up with acquaintances, customers from the bar, or someone I already had saved in my phone. It was a way to clear my mind, to remind myself that there were always options. But no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, the memory of Lisandro always came back. I found myself checking my phone to see if he had texted me, and when he hadn't, I was the one who ended up sending him messages first. That bothered me. It wasn't normal for me. It had always been the other way around. They were the ones who sought my attention, the ones who insisted on seeing me, the ones who adapted to my schedule. With Lisandro, that didn't happen. When he didn't answer me or gave me excuses not to see me, it bothered me. I didn't understand how he could reject me without even trying to make plans for another day. There were times when, to provoke him, I told him I was going out with a friend or that I had plans with someone else. I hoped he would react, ask me who I was with, or show some kind of jealousy. If he responded, he did so briefly, without showing any change in tone. Other times when he suggested we meet up, I told him I couldn't, even if I had nothing to do, just to gauge his reaction. But it didn't work either. He just accepted and said it would be another day. That didn't work either. He just agreed and said another day would be better. As the weeks went by, I noticed something that bothered me even more. Lisandro started treating me like I was just a one-night stand. He showed no interest in knowing anything about me. He didn't ask me how my day had been, and he didn't seek out those long encounters we used to have. He lost the fixation he had at the beginning. Conversations were short, and when we saw each other, it seemed more out of obligation than pleasure. I tried to regain control, to find a way to get him to put me back in the center of his attention, but nothing seemed to work with him. It didn't matter what I said or did. Lisandro wasn't trying to keep me, and that, more than hurting me, hit my ego hard. It was the first time someone had taken away that feeling of control that I had always had. I despaired. I even tried to turn the page, forget him, and go on with my life as before, but I didn't know how. I went out with other men and went about my usual routine, but deep down I felt that everything was automatic, that I was just repeating what I knew to fill the void he had left. The memory of Lisandro was stuck in my head as if he had left something unfinished. Over time, I began to see it as a whim. It wasn't love, not even deep attraction. It was the need for him to look at me again, like he did that first time in the bar. I wanted to recapture that tension, not because I needed it to live, but because I couldn't stand that he had stopped seeing me as someone special. I didn't like to admit it, but that man had achieved something that no one had ever achieved before. He made me feel that I was not in control, and after months I came up with the idea of casting a spell on him. At the suggestion of an acquaintance, she told me I could go to a local witch doctor. I worked in the city, and although it was hard to believe, there were many foreigners who visited Mexico for that kind of tourism. Some went to have themselves cleansed, others too. He worked in the city, and although it was hard to believe, there were many foreigners visiting Mexico for that kind of tourism. Some went to have cleansings, others to seek alternatives to cure illnesses, and there were also those who went to have spells cast. She told me that the witch doctor she was going to recommend wasn't very well known, but that he was very good. According to her, he could help me make any man fall in love with me. At first, I thought it wasn't necessary. It seemed exaggerated and a little absurd. Besides, I still believed I could handle the situation with Lisandro on my own. But one afternoon, while he was distracted, I saw messages from other women coming in on his phone. They weren't just simple conversations. You could tell there was interest. That was the last straw. I felt a mixture of anger and anxiety, as if I were losing something that belonged to me. That's when I took my friend up on her offer and asked her to take me to that witch doctor. The man lived in a neighborhood not far outside the city. From the outside, his house looked very quiet, like any other in the area. It had a green gate and a small garden in front with clay pots and plants that I didn't recognize. But it was when I entered that I realized it was not ordinary. The interior was filled with images of different gods from different religions. There were stone figures, paintings with symbols I did not understand, and several lit candles. In one corner hung amulets and cloth bags with something inside. The room was full of plants. Some hung from the ceiling, others were in jars with water. The atmosphere had a fresh smell, but at the same time it smelled like incense, as if the whole place was permeated with that aroma. The witch listened to me silently as I explained what I wanted. When I finished, he told me he could help me and that what he would give me was not dangerous, as long as I did things exactly as he told me. But for those of you listening to me, anything to do with witchcraft is dangerous. Don't believe witch doctors who try to downplay the situation. Then he prepared what he called a simple ritual. He lit some candles and placed in front of me a tray with small jars, powders, and dry branches. The smell of incense grew stronger and the atmosphere in the room felt more closed. He handed me a small bag with a very fine dark powder and explained that I should use it when I was with Lisandro. First, she told me that when I slept with him, I should try to put a little of that ash behind his ears. Not much, just enough to have an effect. Then he showed me a small jar containing a thick gray liquid. He warned me to slip it into one of his drinks without him noticing, and that the best time to do it was when he was relaxed so that his body would accept it without resistance. He also gave me an instruction that surprised me. He told me that after doing that, I should stay away from him for a few days, avoid responding quickly to his messages, and not agree to see him, even if he insisted. According to the witch doctor, my absence would cause Lisandro to seek me out more intensely and make him the one to take the initiative in everything. He assured me that if I followed instructions to the letter, the man would not only look for me, but he would begin to feel that he needed me. I put the things in my bag, feeling a mixture of curiosity and nervousness, wondering if it would really work. I did everything just as the witch told me. I waited for the perfect moment and placed the ashes behind his ears without him noticing. A few days later, I managed to slip the gray liquid into a drink. After that, I distanced myself. I didn't answer his messages right away and avoided seeing him, just as I had been told. Exactly 1 week later, he showed up at the bar where I worked. He didn't seem desperate, but you could tell by the look in his eyes that he was anxious to see me. He approached me with a smile and jokingly asked me why I hadn't responded to his messages. He asked me to join him for dinner after my shift. We went to a nice restaurant, one of those places he knew I liked. That night, he treated me like a queen, attentive to every detail, as if he wanted to make up for all the time we had been apart. But that's when everything started to go wrong. I don't know if it was pride or something else, but I still had a kind of resentment towards him. I couldn't forget that there was a time when he didn't look for me, when it seemed like I didn't matter to him and he was acting all important. Little by little, a feeling of annoyance grew inside me, like anger that I couldn't hide. I started to punish him. Sometimes I avoided him for no reason, just to make him anxious and make him look for me more. Other times I asked him for money for things I didn't need, just to prove that I had him in my power and he would give it to me. Every day he seemed more dependent, more distracted, as if he were trapped in a cloud. Sometimes he would send flowers to my apartment without me asking him to. Other times he would send me long audio messages telling me about his day in every detail of what he had done. But I didn't even listen to them. I felt a certain disgust for that exaggerated attention, but at the same time I didn't want to let him go. It was like having him tied to me, even though the idea of having him so close was no longer so appealing to me. To this day, I regret what I'm about to tell you, and maybe at the time I didn't see it clearly, but I destroyed a good person. I made life impossible for a good guy. I went back to the witch a few weeks later. This time I wasn't going out of curiosity or to try it out. I went with a clear idea in my head. I sat down in front of him and told him that I wanted Lisandro to never stop thinking about me, that I wanted to be the first thing that came to his mind when he woke up and the last thing before he went to sleep. I wanted my memory to haunt him all the time, everywhere, so that even in the middle of a conversation with someone else, he would think about me. I asked him for something else, that for a few days I would stay away from him without calling or texting, and that during that time Lisandro would feel desperate to see me. I wanted him to can't stand the idea of not hearing from me, that it would drive him to look for me wherever I lived, that he would call me over and over again and even dream about me. The witch listened to me carefully, as if taking mental notes of every word. He warned me that this kind of work wasn't cheap. He gave me the price, and I wasn't worried because I knew I could get it. And it was almost ironic that Lisandro himself, without knowing it, was paying for his own witchcraft. That week I asked him for money with some excuse, and he gave it to me without questioning. With that money, I paid for everything. The witch doctor prepared a more elaborate ritual. This time he used black and red candles, containers with thick liquids, and figures representing the man. He showed me how he was going to direct his thoughts towards me, how he was going to close any door so that another woman could enter his life. While he was working, he asked me if I wanted to know more about him, about his life, his weaknesses. I didn't hesitate to say yes. I asked him to tell me everything. His story, his fears, his weaknesses, his routines. I wanted to know him from head to toe, not leave anything to chance. The witch nodded and assured me that he could get all that information through the connection he had already established with him. According to him, Lisandro was already spiritually open from the first job, which made it easier to manipulate him. I didn't care how he was going to do it, I just wanted the result. The witch told me that once the new work was finished, Lisandro would be completely obsessed with me. He wouldn't want to see anyone else. He wouldn't even be interested in other women. And that was exactly what I wanted. At that time, I wasn't interested in dating other men. I didn't want to risk him getting distracted or feeling that he could replace me. I wanted his world to revolve only around me. It wasn't about love, I knew that well. It was a mixture of jealousy, power, and control. I felt I had to make sure that this man was tied to me not just physically, but in every thought. While the witch doctor finished the ritual, I imagined what those days would be like when Lisandro felt desperate to see me. I visualized him looking for me, knocking on my door, writing me messages at all hours. I saw myself answering his calls whenever I wanted, deciding when to answer and when not to. That idea gave me a feeling of control I had never experienced before. When the witch handed me the last items and final instructions, he assured me that as soon as I left, the effects would begin to manifest themselves. That I shouldn't worry if I didn't see a drastic change in the first few days, because the desperation would grow little by little until he lost control. I left that house with everything I needed, feeling that now I had not only Lisandro's attention in my hands, but his entire will. And the most ironic thing was that he himself, with his own money, had paid for every step to become what I wanted, a man incapable of getting me out of his mind. Everything went as I had hoped. Lisandro began to look for me more often, writing to me at all hours and showing up in places where he knew he could find me. Sometimes when he called me on the phone, I told him to leave me alone, that I needed space. But the next day I treated him well, smiled at him, and told him I loved him very much. Then I would pull away again, playing with his emotions as if they were a string that I could tighten and loosen at will. It was a cycle that repeated itself over and over again. I pushed him away to make him feel rejected, and just when he started to walk away, I pulled him back with a kind word or a night together. Lisandro's reaction was always the same. He came back more devoted, more willing to do anything for me. I remember one afternoon when he showed up at my apartment without warning. He told me he needed to talk to me, and when he sat down in front of me, he started crying. He confessed that he wanted to make things official, that we could live together. I remember one afternoon without warning, he showed up at my apartment. He told me he needed to talk to me, and when he sat down across from me, he started crying. He confessed that he wanted to make things official, that we could live together, make plans, even travel. He said he wanted me to be in his life permanently. I listened to him in silence, his voice broken and his eyes swollen. And for a moment, I felt something like pity, but I couldn't fool him. I told him that it all seemed too fast, that I wasn't ready for something like that. Deep down, I didn't want anything serious. And the strangest thing is that now that I think about it, I don't even know what made me despise him so much. It wasn't just that I was bored by his insistence or that I was annoyed by his dependence, as if part of me enjoyed seeing him like that, more than I could enjoy being with him. Over time, I began to notice that he didn't look the same anymore. His face looked thinner, he had dark circles under his eyes, and the sparkle I used to see in his eyes seemed to have faded. Sometimes he spoke in a tired voice, and it wasn't unusual for him to tell me he hadn't slept much. One afternoon, he arrived with a bouquet of flowers. They were large and brightly colored, and when I first saw them, I felt a pleasant warmth in my chest. I was surprised that he still made such gestures after all. But as I was putting them in a vase, Lisandro mentioned almost in passing that he had a work dinner that night. I don't know why, but that comment upset me. I felt a pang of jealousy, as if that dinner was something more. Without thinking too much about it, I made a scene. I asked him who he was going with, what he was going to do, if it was really for work or if there was another woman. The argument escalated, and in a fit of rage, I threw the flowers back at him. I put them in his hands and told him I didn't want anything from someone who was hiding things from me. That night, Lisandro was late for his dinner. He called me more than once, but I didn't answer. Hours later, he showed up at my apartment with red eyes, saying that he had missed the meeting because he had stayed out, trying to get me to listen to him. He cried for a long time in my living room, sitting in the same chair where weeks earlier he had confessed that I was very pretty. I looked at him, and although at times I felt a certain guilt, there was also a part of me that continued to enjoy the control I had over him. What I didn't imagine was that all of this, my insistence on keeping him trapped, would go beyond what I was prepared to handle. I took every opportunity to get money out of him. It didn't matter if it was something he really needed or not. The important thing was that he bought it for me. If we went out to eat, I chose expensive places, restaurants where the wine cost more than the entire bill at a normal place. If we went shopping, I always took him to stores where I knew the prices were high and he wouldn't object. Once I asked him for a new cell phone, even though mine was practically useless. He bought it for me without thinking twice. Another time I took him to a tech store and stared at one of the most expensive computers they had. I didn't have to insist too much. Just saying that I liked it was enough for him to pay for it. But as the weeks went by, I began to notice something different about him. His face no longer showed the confidence he had when I first met him. His expression seemed tired, dull. Every time he smiled, I realized it wasn't a real smile. It was fake, made so I wouldn't notice that something inside him was broken. His eyes had lost the sparkle they used to have and now looked dull, as if every day weighed more heavily on him. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't even understand why I despised him so much. There was something about the way he looked at me, the way he gave himself to me, that made me reject him. It was as if the more he showed me that he was willing to do anything for me, the more I wanted to push him away. One afternoon we were in his car. He was driving slowly down a quiet avenue. The day was cloudy and for some reason everything felt quieter than usual. Suddenly he started talking to me about the future. He said he thought we could take a trip together, visit another country, and maybe later we could look for an apartment to live in together. He said it in a soft tone, as if he were imagining something that really made him happy. But as soon as I heard him, I felt a pang of annoyance. I didn't understand why he was planning a future with me when I had never given him any signs that I wanted anything serious. I turned towards him and started talking to him in a harsh tone. I told him that he always ruined everything with these ideas, that he couldn't just enjoy the moment without thinking about what would come next. He remained silent, and I saw his hands, still on the steering wheel, begin to tremble. His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't say anything, and far from stopping me, I continued. I yelled at him that I didn't want anything to do with a man like him, that I was tired of his intensity, and that I'd rather find someone who wasn't so insistent. I told him I never wanted to see him again, that I was fed up. His hands were shaking so much that he had to pull over to the side of the road. He couldn't keep driving like that. He just sat there staring ahead with tears falling and breathing heavily. He didn't make a sound, but his crying was obvious. Now that I think about it, that scene breaks my heart, not because of what I said to him, but because of what I saw in his eyes. He was broken. However, at that moment, I felt nothing but contempt. I even laughed at him. I told him that only women cry, that I didn't want such a fragile man by my side. He didn't answer me. He just stared ahead, trying to stop his hands from shaking. I crossed my arms, annoyed, feeling a strange mixture of anger and superiority. And although part of me knew that I had him completely under my thumb, another part didn't want to admit that little by little I was pushing him to a point of no return. That day, after he managed to calm down, he dropped me off at my house without saying another word. And although when I closed the door behind me, I thought I would never see him again, something told me that this man was not going to be able to walk away no matter how much I pushed him, especially because of all the black magic I was doing to him. One night, after ignoring him all day, I decided to answer one of his calls. As soon as I answered, I heard his broken voice. He was begging me to come visit him because he felt lonely. His voice was shaking so much that at times I thought he was going to hang up, but he kept talking. He told me that his apartment felt heavy, like a weight on his shoulders and even in his stomach, as if something was pressing down on him from inside. He told me that he had gone to the doctor that same day because he felt very ill. He had an unbearable headache and a constant tingling sensation in his legs and hands that was driving him crazy. While he was talking, I had the phone on speaker and was doing other things in the kitchen without paying much attention to him. It was as if his words were just background noise, but suddenly I heard him start to cry. He said he felt completely alone, that his children didn't love him, that his ex-wife, and that he had no one. His crying was different from other times. It sounded more choked up, more desperate. He asked me between sobs if I could please come see him, that he just needed to talk to someone that night, that he wouldn't ask me for anything else. I didn't respond to his plea. I just hung up and left him with his tears and his broken voice, with no intention of calling him back at that moment. I didn't write to him or answer him until the next day. When I finally replied, he called me again. His voice sounded even worse, as if he hadn't gotten any rest. He told me he hadn't been able to sleep all night and that he felt like he was going crazy. His tone was agitated, nervous. He told me that during the early hours of the morning, he heard things in the apartment, footsteps running through the rooms as if someone was chasing something or running away. He told me they were loud, fast footsteps and that he heard them so loudly that he was about to run out of his own house. He assured me that he had checked every room, even the closets and the bathroom, but that there was nothing there. The sound accompanied him for hours. He also told me that he felt like the temperature in the room was burning him alive. He said the heat was so unbearable that he had trouble breathing at times. He had to open the windows, but even then he felt like there wasn't enough air. All of this was driving him crazy. He confessed that there were times when he sat on the floor with his head in his hands, trying to calm down. But every time he did, he heard a loud bang or a heavy footstep somewhere in the apartment. As he told me all this, I listened with a mixture of curiosity and detachment. Your voice conveyed genuine fear, a terror that didn't seem made up. I could hear his ragged breathing, his long pauses, as if he were searching for the right way to explain something he didn't even understand himself. Inside, I couldn't help wondering if what he was telling me had something to do with everything I had done to him with the witch doctor's work. There was something in his tone that wasn't that of a man sad about a relationship, but that of someone who was being cornered by something. Still, I didn't let myself get carried away by that feeling. I told him to try to rest, take a bath, and take something for the pain. I hung up before he could ask me again to come see him. That night, as I lay in bed, I kept thinking about his words, about that unbearable heat he said he felt in the footsteps that had tormented him. For a moment, I imagined what it would be like to be alone in a place listening to someone running without anyone else around. It was when Lisandro started getting sick that something inside me began to change. It wasn't concern for love or even true affection, but rather the way I saw him deteriorating every day. Until then, I had been able to ignore many things, but the first time I went to see him and found him so bad, I found it impossible to overlook what was happening. He had a high fever, sweat was pouring down his forehead and neck, and every time he tried to get up, he doubled over in pain. The color of his skin was strange, like a mixture of pale and greenish, a sickly tone I had never seen before. There was a thick smell in the room, a mixture of sweat, damp, and something metallic that I couldn't identify. He hardly left the bathroom because every few minutes he was vomiting. The company he worked for had already given him several days off, and according to him, they had even sent a doctor to check on him. They had left him medication and recommendations, but as the days passed, he didn't get any better. If anything, he got worse. His body seemed weaker, his eyes more sunken, and his voice cracked every time he tried to speak. It was at that point that I began to feel guilty. I couldn't stop thinking that everything that was happening to him was related to the witchcraft I had ordered to be done. Every time I looked at him lying in bed, breathing heavily and with a lost look in his eyes, I told myself that it was no coincidence. That's why I stayed to take care of him. At least that's what I told myself, that it was somehow making up for what I had done. In the midst of those days, Lisandro had strange episodes. They weren't always complete delusions. There were moments when he was perfectly awake, staring at me, and suddenly he would ask me if I could hear the woman crying. I told him no, but he insisted, opening his eyes wide and insisting that she was crying horribly, so loudly that it seemed to fill the entire room. When he told me, his face contorted into a mixture of fear and confusion that he couldn't fake. During the nights, I stayed alone to take care of him because guilt wouldn't let me leave. Besides, he asked me to stay, crying and begging me not to leave him alone, and I promised him I wouldn't, even though I couldn't sleep myself. There was something in that place that kept me alert. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something peeking out from the corners of the room. It was just a shadow, but it had a distinct shape, as if it were a crouching person. And when I turned around, there was nothing there. Other times, when I was about to fall asleep in the chair next to his bed, I heard quick footsteps, as if someone were running down the hallway or from one room to another. The sound was clear, sharp, impossible to mistake. One early morning, I got up to go to the bathroom. I walked quietly so as not to wake him up and turned on the light in the hallway. While I was in there, I heard 3 loud knocks on the door, sharp, as if someone were pushing it with their fist. I stood still, my heart racing, wondering if he had gotten up. But when I came out into the hallway, it was empty and everything was silent. I went into his room and he was asleep, in the same position I had left him. He didn't even seem to have the strength to stand up. That night, I didn't close my eyes again. I sat in the chair, staring at the shadows in the room. One afternoon, when Lisandro was at his worst, he was in his room with an IV. He hadn't been eating well for days and could barely get up to go to the bathroom. I was in the kitchen, preparing something light to see if I could convince him to try a bite. From where I was, I could see the entrance to his room perfectly because the door was open. That's when I saw it. Standing next to his bed was a figure. At first I thought it was a poorly formed shadow, but no. It was still, and I could make it out clearly. It was very thin, taller than the average person, like an animal on 2 legs. Its neck was long and bent forward, as if its head was watching Lisandro closely. It didn't move. I stood motionless with the spoon in my hand and my heart pounding. Whatever was there had a dark, solid presence, nothing that could be mistaken for a reflection or a play of light. The air in the kitchen felt heavy, and I felt the skin on my arms stand on end. I took a step forward, trying to get closer, but the thing didn't react. It remained as real as if it hadn't even noticed that I was looking at it. I swallowed hard and began to pray in a low voice without taking my eyes off the figure. My voice was shaking and my hands were sweating. I didn't know whether to move forward or stay where I was. At one point, fear got the better of me. I looked away, squeezing my eyes shut as if that could erase it from my mind. I felt a tingling sensation on the back of my neck. When I looked back at the room, there was no one there. The space next to the bed was empty, as if nothing had happened. I slowly approached the door, peeking in to see Lisandro. He was still asleep, breathing with difficulty, and the IV drip was slowly dripping from the bag into his arm. He didn't seem to have noticed anything. Still, I couldn't get the image of that figure, that long neck and that posture leaning toward him out of my head. Over the next few days, Lisandro got worse. His fever wouldn't go down, his strength was rapidly fading, and he was talking less and less. He could barely open his eyes, and his skin was paler than ever, with an almost sickly tone. Seeing that there was no improvement, the company decided to admit him to a hospital. It was a quick decision because the doctor who was visiting him at home said that he needed immediate attention. Within hours, they organized the transfer, contacted his ex-wife, and also his children, or someone who could be with him. I stayed out of those calls. I didn't know if I wanted to explain why I was taking care of him or what his family would think when they saw me. I just watched as they took him away on a stretcher, his eyes half open and too weak to say anything. When they closed the door behind them, I was left alone in his apartment. The silence was overwhelming, and every corner reminded me of the last few days. The sound of the IV, the footsteps I had heard in the early morning, the moments when I found him talking to no one, and above all, that figure next to his bed. I couldn't help thinking that what I saw and what was happening to him were connected. I didn't know if it was the result of the witch doctor's work or if something else had taken hold in his life. With worry settling in my chest, I decided to call the witch doctor who had done the work. I didn't care that it was nighttime. I needed answers. I asked him directly if the bad things happening to Lisandro could be related to the witchcraft I had asked him to perform. His response was immediate and confident. "No, not at all. That has no connection," he said in a tone so calm that for a moment I doubted my suspicions. Surely this man is sick. Not satisfied with his explanation, I insisted that there were things that weren't normal, that Lisandro was seeing and hearing things that had gotten worse too quickly. The witch doctor, as if to reassure me, offered to read my cards. He asked me to concentrate on the question. He assured me that what had made Alessandro sick was loneliness. He said that feeling of abandonment combined with emotional problems could destroy a person faster than any physical illness. He swore that there was nothing else behind it, that I shouldn't worry about what I believed. I hung up the phone, but I couldn't rest. Something inside me refused to accept that version of events. I felt that what he had seen and what I myself had witnessed that afternoon in his room couldn't be a coincidence. That witch doctor could swear to me all he wanted, but deep down I knew he was lying or hiding something. I didn't sit idly by. I began to discreetly ask around for other healers. Someone who had no connection to the first one and who could give me another version. It wasn't long before I was recommended one who lived in a more remote neighborhood, known for cleaning work and for removing heavy things that people couldn't explain. I went to see him without thinking too much about it. I sat down in front of him and told him everything. How it had started, what I had asked the other witch doctor, and what had happened to Lisandro since then. The man listened to me in silence, without interrupting me. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and told me in a firm voice that what I feared was true. What was happening to Lisandro was indeed the result of the witchcraft I had ordered. His words froze me. He explained that Lisandro was already deeply involved in dark things and that there was no possible salvation. According to him, those entities that I couldn't see, but that Lisandro could feel, were dark energies that had entered through the work and had taken root in his life. He told me that at first they attacked him in his mind, playing with his nerves and thoughts, making him hear and see things to weaken him, and that once they had him vulnerable, they began to affect his body, draining his energy until he became ill. "It's as if they're rotting him from the inside," said the healer, First the head, then the body. I felt a chill run down my back. It wasn't just fear, it was a direct blow to my conscience. All the pieces fit together. Lisandro's delusions, the sleepless nights, the figure I had seen next to his bed, the way he had deteriorated so quickly. At that moment, it all came crashing down on me like a bucket of cold water. I could hardly breathe. The healer watched me in silence, as if waiting for me to say something, but I couldn't articulate a word. I stared at the floor, feeling that what had started as a whim had become a death sentence for him and that perhaps it would be the same for me. Unfortunately, Lisandro passed away a few days after being admitted to the hospital. His body couldn't take it. He was already too weak and sick, and according to what I was told in his last days, he could barely speak. I didn't have the chance to see him. I heard that his family was with him, his ex-wife and children, and I didn't want to go near them. I didn't know how to look at them, but the following nights were hell. I started dreaming about him. In all my dreams, I saw him and I always woke up crying. These were dreams that didn't fade away with the passing of time. They stayed with me all day long. I saw myself standing in front of him, and I felt miserable, broken inside. I remembered him as the 35-year-old man I met at the bar with his calm gaze and nice smile, the man who spoke slowly and seemed to enjoy simple conversations. And it hurt me to know that my desire to have control over him, to make him feel bad, to manipulate him, led him to go through the worst moments of his life. I also remembered all the times I hurt him for no reason. I remembered him crying on the phone, begging me to visit him. I saw him sitting in his car with his hands trembling on the steering wheel while I insulted him. And above all, I saw how his gaze gradually faded until it became those empty eyes that seemed unable to find a way out. I would wake up crying, and sometimes I couldn't stop. There were nights when I would go on like this for hours with my pillow soaked and an intense pain in my chest. I couldn't help wondering when he had done something so bad to me that I would treat him that way without a shred of remorse. Sometimes in the midst of my crying, I felt that I wasn't alone. I turned my head and wanted to see a shadow in some corner of the room. It was a dark, motionless shape that vanished as soon as I blinked. At first, I thought it was just tiredness or my mind playing tricks on me. But it started happening again and was always accompanied by that same feeling, a horrible heaviness in my chest as if I were being crushed, and a lump in my throat that made it hard to breathe. It was a weight that followed me everywhere. During the day, I didn't talk about it with anyone, but inside I knew that guilt was eating me alive. I couldn't fool myself. I was the one who decided to go to the witch doctor, who paid to make Lisandro obsessed with me, who pushed him away every time he tried to get close to me in a genuine way. I was the one who mocked him when he was most vulnerable, who turned his dependence into a cruel game. I told myself over and over again that I didn't know when I crossed the line, that I didn't understand why I despised him so much if he hadn't really done anything bad to me. I couldn't even justify it by saying that he had brought it on himself and now there was no way to change it. The nights became a mixture of memories and presences. Sometimes I would wake up with a start, thinking I had heard his voice calling me from somewhere in the room. Other times, I thought I heard soft footsteps, as if someone were walking around my bed. I had never been afraid of sleeping alone, but now every noise made me tense. And the worst part was that even though part of me wanted to think it was all my imagination, deep down I knew that something of him was still here. I didn't know if it was his shadow, his resentment, or simply my guilt taking shape. But every time that darkness appeared in the corner, I felt like it was reminding me of everything I had done and that somehow that memory would never let me go. Now I know that sooner or later, life will make me pay for everything I did. I'm not afraid because the guilt I carry is stronger than any punishment that may come. I pray to God every day for Lisandro's rest, so that his soul will not continue to suffer because of me, so that he may find the peace that I denied him in life. I cry for him because I remember him in his best moments before I started to destroy him. I know it's useless now. No tears, no prayers, no regrets can erase what I did. I feel like trash, like someone who wasted the opportunity to be a better person. And even though I try to move on, the truth is that I live with the certainty that as long as I breathe, I will carry his fading gaze and all the pain I caused him. Greetings, my beautiful community of guests. How are you doing? I hope with all my heart that you are doing well. This story was very difficult to tell, really even difficult to read. I find it hard to believe that there are people like this in the world, especially that there is such ease in hurting others. Please take good care of yourselves. Be careful with the people you surround yourselves with. May life bless you, my dear guests. You are the best community one could have. You will always be welcome here. See you next time. The Last Guest.